But then, you know, we start to notice that every turn we're doing, they're doing too. And we were like, oh my gosh, this guy's following us.
Every day, people experience absolutely terrifying things, and while some have perfectly reasonable explanations, others just seem to be unexplainable, which leaves us with a ton of questions. From a creepy camping story, to a potentially haunted house, all the way to an old, horrifying unsolved mystery. On today's list, I'll be covering 10 true scary stories that can't be explained. Starting off this list at number 10. This story comes from a man called Carter on Reddit, and they say, when I was about 13, I was an adventure explorer wannabe. I used to pack a tent and survival gear to go camping up the hill about 4 miles from my house. I set up my tent in this small field almost entirely surrounded by woods. I made my beans, went to sleep. I was woken up at 3 a.m. to the sound of what I thought was a wild animal approaching the tent. Not unusual. I woke up at sunrise, opened the tent, and found a parcel wrapped in white aged cloth, tied in straw string with a note on top, "Welcome, friend." Inside the parcel, get this, a calf leg / hoof. Never told a soul about it to this day. Scared the soul out of me. Never went camping again and didn't stop thinking about it for months. I truly cannot blame Carter for this at all, because that would have been absolutely terrifying. I can't imagine why anyone would want to do this, but it probably wasn't for anything good. Moving on to number 9. This story comes from the Reddit user Night Owls and is in reference to something that happened to his brother. He explained that one day his brother was out for food with some coworkers. This is when one of the coworkers slipped mercury, the metal, into the brother's milkshake. Where did he get this mercury from? I have no idea. What kind of mercury was it? I'm also unsure, but by the sounds of the rest of this story, it seems like it must have been some sort of organic mercury compound that would have proven to be fatal. Luckily, the brother didn't end up drinking this tainted milkshake, and this coworker was caught. The eeriest part of this story, though, is how when the coworker was being questioned and they were trying to establish motive, he explained that there just wasn't a reason. There was no animosity or jealousy. He just wanted to do it. That is truly one of the creepiest things in the whole world to me. People who try to harm others for simply no reason at all other than because they felt like it. Moving on to number 8. This story comes from the Reddit user Shortweeb, and this is what they had to say. In 4th grade, my friend brought a picture to school with her to share among our group of friends. We passed it around talking about it. It was just a picture of her family, so we thought nothing of it. After school, me and her were hanging out by a tree and talking about the picture. She pointed at something that everyone in our group had brushed over. It was a very clear and visible face looking over her shoulder. I can't joke about this. It was a serious face in an otherwise normal family photo. When I asked who that was, she said she didn't know, and there had been no one behind her when they took the picture. Sometimes I think about it and it's quite freaky. Imagine getting a nice family photo and seeing this sort of a thing. That honestly is probably too much for a 4th grader to even comprehend, but I wonder if any of the adults noticed the stranger in the photo. They would have had to, right? Moving on to number 7. This story comes from the Reddit user Cosmic Comics and starts off from a day they were walking in the woods and came across a blue tent, or more so what had once been a tent but was now torn to shreds with the poles snapped in half, and it was just sitting in a messy pile. When they first spotted this mess, it seemed like the blue tent was surrounded by flowers, but once they got closer they realized it was pieces of paper that turned out to be pages from Stephen King's The Shining. The pieces had burnt and charred edges like they had been lit on fire, as if someone really wanted to destroy the book. They didn't get any closer and just shrugged it off as some kind of student film set or artistic endeavor, but they also acknowledged that whoever put it there did a good job because it was certainly very creepy. Flash forward to this person seeing the news not too long after, and they see that a man who had been missing from the next town over had been found passed away in his blue tent in the woods. This person ends off by saying, "I don't know if he was still in there when I walked past. I don't want to know." Concerning the fact that they didn't know what had potentially happened there and still got that eerie feeling, that really says a lot to the bad energy that was in that area that day. I hope that they were also able to find out what happened to that man. Moving on to number 6. This story comes from CHICKENBRIK on Reddit and takes place in their first girlfriend's house. The house had been built in the woods in the late 1980s, early 1990s, and this story takes place in 2001. They were in the kitchen together when the girlfriend said that she had previously seen an old man with a large white beard sitting in her living room. He laughed this off and didn't really take it seriously, which seems kind of rude, but that's what he did. A few weeks later, the girlfriend was in the kitchen and he was heading from the washroom to the kitchen, and this is when he sees an older man sitting in her dining room at the head of the table. He once again didn't take this seriously and thought that maybe she had just given him enough information when she told him her story before that his mind was just playing tricks on him. Fast forward a few months now, and both of them have basically forgotten about these incidents, and there was a friend staying with them who was from Brazil. The friend was downstairs one day and the couple were upstairs, and all of a sudden the friend came bursting through the door in tears. They asked what was wrong, and the friend explained that she was just downstairs listening to music when she turned the corner to go into the living room and saw an old man with a long white beard just sitting there. Neither of the couple had mentioned this story to the friend at all, and needless to say, they moved out shortly after this incident. The person telling this story says that they often think about writing to the people who now live in the house to see if they've ever seen anything strange. I definitely think that they should, and they should give us all an update when they get a response. Moving on to number 5. This story comes from the Reddit user QUIRKYPHEASANT and is about a UFO encounter their uncle had when he was a teenager. They explain that he was at the beach in the middle of the day when he saw an oval-shaped object about half a kilometer up in the sky. They then say, he said that everyone, there were over 100 other people at the beach and they all witnessed this, could see that the object was huge, big enough that if it had come down, it would have flattened the entire beach. Everyone watched it for about half an hour, and during that time it didn't move one bit. Heaps of people were just standing or sitting around watching it. My uncle said, and this is almost a direct quote, "You know how you sometimes feel like you just have to get out of a place? Like you have to take off running? Well, this was different. You felt the opposite, like you had to stay." After half an hour, the object started moving very slowly, and then it just shot sideways extremely fast and disappeared. No plane or human-made flying object could have moved that way or looked like that unless the government was or is developing technologies we know nothing of, which is a strong possibility. I can't believe that all of these people had this experience together and I am just now hearing about it. Do you guys have any theories on what it could have been? If you do, please let me know down in the comments, because my only thought is, of course, aliens. Moving on to number 4. This is a pretty crazy story that comes from a Reddit user who's telling one of their grandfather's stories. He was a Hungarian soldier who fought during the invasion of the Soviet Union. It is unclear what year this was in, but they were traveling and passed by many villages, some of which they were welcomed in, others of course not, but there was one village that he was never able to forget. The first thing he saw was an older lady who was sitting outside of her home with a broom by her side, but she was unmoving. They then quickly realized that the entire village population, every single person, had recently died. People even still had food prepared on their plates or seemed as though they were in the middle of chores when everyone just dropped. He even described 2 men who seemed like they had been in the middle of a conversation. He never got an answer of how or why this happened, as it is of course unbelievably unusual and absolutely frightening. He always believed it was some kind of chemical weapon testing, which is of course very spooky, but this is just one mystery we may never have the answer to for sure. Moving on to number 3. This story comes from Ardent Seraph on Reddit, and they explained that they had a friend who lived in a trailer park, and every time they would go to visit, they took some back gravel roads in order to get there, and they would always pass an old, small concrete building. The building was really run down with no doors or windows and walls that were crumbling, and every time they saw it, they always felt like they wanted to go and check it out, but they always had this lingering feeling that they shouldn't be in there and that something was off. One day, as they were passing, they saw it fenced off with some ripped up yellow tape. They assumed some kids had been playing around or something and someone had blocked it off, perhaps, but they truly didn't think much of it. A while later, this person was at their grandma's house and they were watching one of those true crime shows that's like Dateline or 48 Hours or something similar to that. The show told this story of a girl who had gone missing in a county that was close by after a party one night, and how no one was ever able to find this girl. Clothes of hers had been found scattered in different areas, but one day a kid had found the exact clothes she had been wearing on the night of her disappearance. The clothes were found in that building. Moving on to number 2. This is a story that happened a while ago, you guys, but I had never heard of it before and I absolutely needed to include it on today's list. This is the story of the Yuba County Five. On February 24th, 1978, 5 men from Yuba City, California attended a basketball game at California State University. All 5 men went missing after this night, and several days later the group's car was found abandoned in a remote area of the Plumas National Forest that was way out of the way from where they would have been. There was no reason for the car to have been abandoned either, because it was in totally fine and working condition when it was found. In June of 1978, 4 of the men were found passed away near a trailer camp that is deep in the forest, but the 5th man has never been found. There's a lot of strange information about this case, such as how one of them starved to death even though he was surrounded by food. There's truly too much to cover about this story that I unfortunately don't have time for in this video, so if you're interested, I would highly recommend looking up this case, as it truly is unexplainable and just absolutely terrifying. I really hope that one day we'll be able to find out what happened to these men. And moving on to number 1. This story comes from the Reddit user DADADAWN, and they start off by explaining that they lived alone with their dogs in a brownstone in a gated community. She works a few miles from her home and came home every day at lunch to let the dogs out. After she had lived in this location for about a year, she started smelling a man's cologne really strongly in her front entryway and up the stairs in her home. She didn't really think much of it and just chalked it up to the smell coming from the next door neighbor. This happened for a while, and then one day she found a dollar bill folded lengthwise on top of her purse. This stood out for 2 reasons. One being that she never carried cash, and the second being that she never folded her bills lengthwise. She thought it was weird, but she tried to just put it out of her mind. A few weeks later, she came home at lunch and found her dogs standing in front of her bedroom door, staring at the door and wagging their tails. She thought they just wanted to go and lay on her bed, but she was in a hurry, so she quickly took them for a walk, put them back inside, and then left for work again. When she got back home at the end of the day, she found about 21 dollar bills, all folded lengthwise, placed neatly around her home. She grabbed the dogs, got the heck out of there, and called the police. No one was ever found, and she of course had the locks changed, but ended up moving about a month later because she of course just didn't feel safe there anymore. I so badly wish I could know what happened here, but I am just glad that nothing super sinister happened to her or the dogs. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thank you so much for checking it out. I've been your host, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you next time. Bye! I was woken up at 3. Sorry, that's so funny to me. I made my beans and I went to sleep. It was just a picture of her family, so we thought nothing of it. After school, me and her, I don't know why I ended off that sentence so weird.